It seems to say that there's a correlation between firms that have made a commitment to investing in in legal technology and profitability numbers, which I think is an interesting thing in the sense that one of the fears for people is, gosh, if I get more efficient, do my billable hours go down, right? And so it kind of ran in the face of that logic there.
Today on Law Next, I'll be speaking with Dean Sonderegger, Senior Vice President and General Manager, Wolters Kluwer Legal and Regulatory US. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, on to this week's interview. Dean, welcome to Law Next.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
And I should say that we are here face-to-face, recording live at the American Association of Law Libraries annual convention in Washington, D.C. So it's an extra treat that I get to speak face-to-face to you.
Absolutely.
So, Dean, you were just less than 2 months ago, I guess, named Senior Vice President and General Manager. You are not new to the company, but you are now effectively in charge of U.S. operations for the company. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
So what does that mean? What exactly are your responsibilities? What's your area of oversight?
Sure. So previously, I ran a portion of the legal business in the U.S. called Legal Markets. And so now my responsibility has expanded to address other content areas that weren't covered, so employment, HR, pensions, things like that, but also to manage our legal education business. So little known secret, we have a legal education business that builds textbooks for courses in law schools, and also the Kluwer Law International business, which is cross-border international law but published in English and located in Amsterdam. So just a couple of additional things, a lot of which dovetail into the traditional content business in the U.S. that our customers have been receiving for many, many years.
And just quickly, what were you doing before you came here? Tell me a little bit more about your background.
I have a wide and varied background, including a misspent youth as a computer software developer. So I actually started as a technologist for many, many years. And then in the heyday of the internet boom, right before Y2K, I helped raise a bunch of money for a business that will remain nameless and that went out of business. And that kind of motivated me to shift over into the business side of things. And I went to work for a little sleepy employee-owned company called BNA based in Washington, D.C., but in the tax business. And I was there for 13 years, and about 4.5 years ago, I got a wonderful opportunity to come and switch into legal and work for Wolters Kluwer, which is technically a competitor, but we're all still good friends.
Good. Take a second to think about the best-run law firms in the country. They consistently handle more cases in less time while spending fewer hours toiling over tasks like billing and client intake. My Case was designed to help even the busiest law firms achieve peak efficiency. Through automation of routine administrative duties, templatized workflows, and centralized calendars, My Case makes short work of your day-to-day processes and keeps your staff on task. Visit mycase.com to learn more and start a free trial. That's mycase, mycase.com. So I was looking at your bio on the Wolters Kluwer website, and it says that you are responsible for accelerating the vision and strategy for the business with a particular focus on rapid development of advanced digital products and services to enhance customers' efficiencies and workflow. Now, you may not have written that, but that's what it says.
No, I do love my marketing people, though, I have to say.
But so in that you are responsible for the vision and strategy, what do you see that as? What is your vision? What is the vision and strategy?
So I think that when you think about the legal market as a whole, but also the content overlay in that, the traditional view is that we go out and we find content and we use that as part of the practice of law. It helps inform us of what's going on in the regulatory environment and how to practice law. And I think that's held, and that still holds today. But I think when we look at where the future is going, and the pressures on attorneys to produce more with less, which is, I think, true for most of businesses at this point in time, I think we see a future of what we call expert solutions. So expert solutions, I would roughly characterize as solutions that are embedded in the workflow of an attorney or a researcher that have leveraged deep domain experience with two goals. One goal is to improve the efficiency or reduce the time it takes to do something, and the second is to drive outcomes. So I think when technology is particularly effective, it helps us do both of those things. And I think that from a Wolters Kluwer standpoint, we have this legacy of editorial coverage and excellence in deep domain expertise. And so I think if we can combine that legacy with workflow types of technology and some insights, that helps us drive the success of our customers and their customers.
And where do you think you are towards achieving that vision? I mean, where are the strengths as you stand today, and what are the weaknesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and so just to finish off the previous question, sorry, because I don't know that I answered it entirely.
Yeah,
and so my job, I think, is to try and accelerate that transformation from the traditional content business into basically what is a largely expert solutions business. And to your question that you just asked, where are we at with that? I think that we are in the early stages of that. And I think the market as a whole is in the early stages of that, as we have such an influx of legal technology that's coming into the lives of our customers every day, attorneys, researchers dealing with these things. And in a lot of cases, the technology is starting to mature and really find tight use cases, but I think it is early, right? And I would liken this that if you went back, say, a decade ago, where people would look kind of warily at e-discovery as a technology, whereas it's commonplace right now. So I think that this is something that we're in the process of. So from our standpoint, we continue to have the rich content set and will for the foreseeable future, but we are starting to see certain tools that come out, and I think that our Tax Plus series is one of those. I think our Reg Review series on securities, where you're actually starting to apply the domain expertise into the workflow and accelerate those things. And so it's kind of in that early stage where you've got some things that go very deep into the workflow, and we're looking very carefully at where we can add more value, if that makes sense.
Something interestingly, I was talking to somebody here at this, as I said, we're at the Law Librarian Convention, and we're all talking about all the vendors here in our casual conversations. And somebody said something interesting to me about your company that I'm not sure I had really thought about before, but their perception is, in part thanks to you, if you want to call it thanks, is that the company has become a much more agile company over the last year or two, or maybe more than that.
Right.
I wonder what your perception of that is and how you see it.
Well, that's certainly our goal, right? So I think that the idea is that, and if you look at I direct people to Eric Ries's book, excellent book, The Lean Startup, as kind of one of those things that a lot of people in the technology world have looked at as kind of the not meant to be blasphemous, but the Bible, if you will, of this thing. And I think that the idea behind that is that we have small batches, so we try and find value for a customer. We build something that is something they can use, and we make sure we measure whether or not it's got value. We learn from that, and we come back into another small batch. So that's been kind of an approach that we've taken, is to get much closer to our customers, partner with them, co-create with them in some cases, so that we get that feedback loop much earlier in the development process, as opposed to, you don't want to be in a situation where you go out for a year to 2 years worth of investment for millions of dollars and then find out that the market doesn't like or doesn't care about the thing that you developed. I'd much rather learn that the first day that hey, this idea doesn't really make any sense, and then I'll go do something else. And so that's been something that's been kind of driving force for us in the marketplace. And I think agile is hopefully. I'm flattered to hear that, because I think that's exactly what we're trying to go for.
So I neglected to say this in the introduction. Maybe I'll re-record the introduction. But one of the key topic we wanted to talk about today is a survey that Wolters Kluwer just conducted called "The Future Ready Lawyer: The Global Future of Law." And before we get to that, which we'll do in just a second, I should also mention that you and I share something in common, which is that we both write a column for Above the Law. You write a lot about innovation in technology, innovation in law practice generally, not just about at your company or about with respect to the things you're involved in. And I'm just curious, what about that? How did you get interested in writing about that? What is it about what's going on in that broader sense that really interests you?
Well, I think that there's I think there's a lot of challenge that people have when they come to the idea of innovation, and it's a concept that is a little scary for people. And then you add technology on that, and it gets even a little scarier. And one of our core constituents has been the librarian community, and another has been the lawyer community. And I think that the idea of layering innovation and technology on for those people is something new. And so one of the things, and I guess, and I would add also that anybody who's been around legal tech can tell you that there's a whole host of terms, terminology, acronyms, and hype in some cases that go along with that. So the thought that I had when I started to write the column was to say, can we get something that is the intersection of the practice of law and technology from more of a product and technologist perspective to try and help people get some signal amongst all the noise there? Can they get to what's an understanding and to simplify things for them in a sense so it becomes a little less scary, and hopefully that they get the chance to dabble in and play in that themselves. And that was kind of the purpose, which is obviously it ties into the things that we're trying to do at Wolters Kluwer, but I think just in a general sense of the community, I think it's a necessary thing to move the conversation forward, if you will.
So I have to think that there were parts of this survey that confirmed, or maybe even or confirmed or denied. Is that the right word? some of your own perceptions about what's the role of technology in driving forth the global future of law. But I mean, let's start with the survey and tell us what it was and why you did it.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we've lacked has been, in large part, a sense of what is the perception of a working attorney around the use of technology, and how is that going to change over a period of time? And the other thing that we lacked was an ability to look at that from inside counsel and outside counsel. And we're a global company, so we were also very interested in seeing, are there differences, for instance, in Europe versus in the U.S. in perception? And so we endeavored to create a survey amongst those groups of people to take a look at what the perceived impact of technology is today and what it is moving forward, what people think is going to be the impact of that. And I think that it was resounding that that folks felt like the use of legal technology is going to increase dramatically over the next 3-year period. So that kind of confirmed, I think, some of the things that we're thinking about in there. But it was the idea was that was really what we wanted to get a sense of where is the market going on this.
Yeah. So was that, I mean, from a sort of a mile-high view, without getting into the details at this point, was that what your biggest takeaway? What was your biggest takeaway from the survey?
It's a couple of different things. One of the things was that we asked firms to rate themselves on their degree of use of technology. And so firms that were currently investing in legal technology in a significant fashion we called them those leading firms that weren't doing that but had a plan to invest in the next 3 years. We called those firms transitioning firms. And then there were a small group that we called trailing firms that had no plans to invest, but that truly was a minority. And I think one of the big takeaways that we got to was that we asked those firms to self-report increases in profitability or how profitability worked for them in the last year. And 2 out of 3 firms that labeled themselves as leading reported increased profits over the past year. 1 and 2 of those that considered themselves transitioning reported increased profits. And that's an interesting gap. I mean, it seems to say that there's a correlation between firms that have made a commitment to investing in legal technology and profitability numbers, which I think is an interesting thing in the sense that one of the fears for people is, gosh, if I get more efficient, do my billable hours go down, right? And so it kind of ran in the face of that logic there.
Yeah, that really jumped out at me. Of course, to me, that was probably one of the most standout points of the survey. Was there anything in the survey, again, just thinking about it in terms of the big terms that really surprised you, that came out in a way that you wouldn't have expected, or found something that you wouldn't have expected about trends?
I don't know if it surprised me, but I think it was an interesting tale, is that we asked participants in the survey, we said, how many of you think that there's going to be a significant impact to the practice of law by, and we went down technology by technology, right? And so there are a whole host of these things. And then we also asked them how well they understood that technology, those set of technologies. And it was about 2 out of 3 respondents or higher that said, hey, there's going to be definitely an impact from these technologies on average in the next 3 years, right? But then typically around 25% or less of those folks said that they really understood the technology. So I think that it was kind of an interesting thing for me. And as those of us who are in the legal tech community in one fashion or another, we obviously dig in and kind of spread out in these various technologies. It was interesting to see that gap, if you will, between folks that really understood kind of how they thought these technologies would apply and the sense that there's going to be an impact. So that was an interesting thing. And then that came across when we started to say, what were the things that were reasons why technology was resisted. Over a third of that was a lack of understanding in technology. So that kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, it talks a lot. I mean, I was talking at a program earlier today about this idea that the law librarians here were talking about the gap that they're seeing in their firms between the understanding that they're expected to have about technology, and a lot of them are still struggling to figure it out, but that the lawyers in their firms are just so behind on getting this. And I mean, what's interesting about your survey is that really suggests that there is, as you said, a correlation between a firm's, it seems to be a correlation between a firm's future success or future ability to be successful and be profitable and where they are right now in terms of their understanding of technology. I don't think this was really in your survey, but do you have thoughts about how you address that knowledge gap, how you get lawyers up to speed on this stuff?
Well, that is obviously one of the 10 million or perhaps more dollar questions. If you think about $1 billion in legal tech in the last year or so, it's a lot of money going around that. I think that I kind of would pivot that a little bit. Is I think that it's an effect of some of the newness of the tools and technology. And I think if you think of like Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, that kind of concept of the early market versus the mature market, and how it's very difficult to jump from the early market, the early adopters, to the mainstream market because those markets have different needs. And so I think in a lot of cases what you see is these tools are in that early market. And characteristic of the early market would be things like they're perhaps not have the best support, the interface may be a little rougher, you kind of have to really want to tinker with something to make it work, but it'll work. Whereas when we go into the mainstream market, the expectation is that things move smoothly, there are no glitches. And I think that a lot of the tools that you see, and I would say document review, for instance, is one of those things in that market right now, is that highly useful, really cool technology, but some of the tools that you use look a lot like a software tool that a programmer may use, which is very different from a lawyer. So I think one of the things that you see is just the maturity of the entrance into the market. And I think that time will fix that. Time and probably to some extent consolidation will fix that over the next few years. And then I think that the other thing is, and this comes kind of to a different part of the survey, but I think that one of the temptations that we find ourselves as technologists sometimes is to get a really cool solution in place without a whole lot of correlation to how is this going to be used. And I would call that the technical term is a use case. What is the thing that you're trying to do with the tool? And I think that what you will see over the next period of time is in the next 3 years in particular is I think you'll see a better development of the use cases associated with this. So as the technology gets more specific, that tends to drive better understanding because it's very tangible. And so to take a specific example, when I think about document review software, and there's a number of them out on the market, I think about something like M&A due diligence. And so I'm looking through, say, 1,000 supplier supplier contracts, and I want to know which ones are assignable, right? And so that's something that a machine learning, natural language processing document review software does a real nice job of identifying the 10 out of 1,000 without having to manually go through it. That's a pretty tight use case. I can understand that. If on the other hand, I have something where it's like I have a tool that I'm going to ask any question from the aforementioned and feared robot lawyer, that's pretty loose. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with that. So I think as we move forward, what you see more of these defined tight use cases come out and firms having success with them and the socialization of that. I think that drives understanding.
Yeah. Are those use cases as clear? You talk in the survey about transformational technologies, as you alluded to. Are those as clear across the different kinds of transmission? I mean, are lawyers as sure about blockchain as about AI or analytics or something like that? I mean, how are these different types of technologies being perceived and adopted in firms?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that in some cases the technology, well, in all cases, I mean, we talked about the idea of artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, and analytics were kind of some of the categories we had there. I think those are all techniques or tools that get applied to a particular use case, and I think there are different stages, if you will. I think that in predictive analytics, we've seen, and Bob and I were talking about this before the podcast, we've seen a big push into litigation analytics by all the major vendors, right? So I think that's starting to get a little bit more mature, and we saw early entrants in that, and we've seen some consolidation there also in the sense that some of those companies have been purchased. So I think that use case is starting on the litigation side, starting to get a little tighter. I think that the transactional law side, document analytics, I think that's wide open at this point in time. So I think that that's an area you're going to see a lot of movement in the next few years. I think blockchain, to take the flip side of that, is one of those things where it's a pretty cool technology. It has a pretty tight use case for Bitcoin. And I've written a fair amount about blockchain technology to try and demystify a little bit, but I think that we're struggling a little bit right now with, despite a lot of interest in smart contracts and other things like that, to get a use case that is compelling to the market right now on that. And so that's lagging a little bit. But so I think it's the long answer to your short question is that I think it varies by the technology itself.
Yeah. Have you seen a good use case for blockchain? I mean, what do you hold up as an example of?
The best use case, other than the Bitcoin electronic anonymous cash transaction use case, I think that you've seen things like supply chain, where there's a contractual element to supply chain. And the classic example of that is I am shipping something from one place to another, and I need to keep the goods that I'm shipping at a particular temperature. It has to be refrigerated, and I've got a sensor that writes in an audit throughout the whole thing, and there's a contractual obligation for the shipper to provide that. And so you can have a rock solid audit trail of the temperatures as you go through there. Those types of things seem to lend themselves very well to that. I've written about real estate transactions as an example of that, where you have significant issues with fraud, and so identity verification through blockchain would seem to make sense. The challenge with that is, and I had mentioned this, is that real estate transactions are done at the county level. So you have 20,000 counties in the U.S. So it's a formidable kind of challenge to build a system that handles that.
Right. We'll get back to my interview in just a moment. But first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, let's continue this week's interview. Something we hear a lot about are client demands driving change at law firms, changes in pricing, changes in adoption of technology. And I know that the survey looked at that to some extent in terms of both what corporate legal departments are looking for from their firms, and also some of the pressures that they face. But I mean, what's your perception, either based on your own experience or from the survey, about how clients are driving kind of the future of where we're going with law practice and innovation.
Yeah, this was, to me, one of my favorite parts of the survey was the corporate legal department response. And we did ask about law firm evaluation factors. And the interesting thing was both in Europe and in the U.S., the top three factors were the same. So we asked about a whole bunch of factors that you use to evaluate law firms as outside counsel. And the top three were price, the ability to understand client needs and to partner with your clients, and then specialization, to go deep into a particular practice area. Now, the interesting thing is that price was much more important in the U.S. than in Europe, and I think that you can attribute that to the emergence of legal operations as a discipline. Is probably a little bit more mature in the U.S. than it is in Europe at this point in time. But none of those three things said legal technology, right? So, and legal technology was on the list, and it was actually down in the, the 8 or 9% of the respondents listed that as the primary. And to give an example, 37% listed price as the biggest deal in the U.S. And so the question comes back to say, okay, well, why is that? And I think it comes back to the same thing, is that law firms do not exist to provide services to their corporate clients based on innovation technology alone. They are driving to an outcome for their customers, right? So if I have a trademark infringement case, my goal is not to see how innovative the law firm is. My goal is to get the other person to stop using the trademark as quickly as possible and to have the greatest results, greatest likelihood of success. Technology, of course, drives that, right? Legal technology allows me to do that in a way where I'm more informed going into the case. I'm able to do it more efficiently than I would otherwise. And so does that then drive price? Of course. I have to spend less time on that. It drives profitability because I might have less hours that get written off on those types of things. Does it involve my ability to understand my client needs? Sure. If I can do research with legal technology that is able to identify very carefully what the needs of my clients are, or that industry or other things are going on, it plays into that. But it comes back to being a means to an end and not being an end to itself. And that to me was a confirming thing. We always feel that that's there, but it was nice to see that come back in the results.
Yeah. A couple of numbers. I'm not sure they fully jive to me in terms of the findings of the survey. One was that 49% of organizations feel that they are effectively leveraging technology today, which I'm not sure rings true to me. I'm not sure half of organizations are effective, but I'm sure a lot of them think they are. But then at the same time, it also said only about a third of lawyers believe that their organization is very well prepared to keep pace with changes in the legal market. I mean, how can you square those two kinds of things?
I can, and of course it's speculative because we don't have the ability to go back and easily interview the people. But sure. I look at things in terms of technology today, which I think are more foundational technologies, and moving forward, I think are more of those enabling technologies. So when we talk about just things as simple as matter management or law firm practice management, I think of those as technologies today that by and large are probably being managed fairly effectively, and certainly not as effectively by every organization, but I think that's true of anything, right? So I think that you see that, but I think that if you were to ask very specifically, and of course we can't go back and re-ask the survey questions this year, but we will again next year, just to say there will be another Future Ready Lawyer survey, because this has been a great kind of insightful vehicle. But I think that if you were able to ask, how well are you leveraging transformative technologies, I think you would have probably gotten a different answer on that. So that's how I would personally square that.
Yeah. So for those 2/3 of lawyers who do not believe that their organization is well prepared to keep pace with changes in the legal market, what advice do you have for them? I mean, how do they get their firms prepared?
I think that when you look at, first of all, what is the plan? What are you trying to do? It always kind of comes back to that. For any organizational strategy, we start with, before we get to the tactics that we proceed with, we try and get to, hey, how am I going to benefit from this? What is the plan to make my firm differentiated, my corporate legal department more successful? And if I've got a strategy from that, I can start to say, what are the elements that have to be able to be leveraged to fulfill that? One of those common elements, I think, in the law firm market is making sure I've got the right skills and technology there. And I think this is a huge problem in the sense that or I shouldn't say a huge problem. I think it's a challenge for a lot of firms in a marketplace where we refer to people as lawyers and non-lawyers. I think that recruiting talent that's highly in demand to go in and work as a non-something position is hard. And I think that the other thing that goes along with that is trying to understand and choose carefully what battles I'm going to tackle. And so I have this conversation probably more with large firms than I do with small firms, but I point out to them that as a close to €5 billion company, we struggle sometimes to hire the best data scientists and AI programmers because they're so highly in demand. And we certainly do, and we go after that. But to have a law firm sustainably hire their own team of these developers to go in and mine their data is challenging. It's not to say that they can't do it, but it's challenging. So I think that you kind of want to grab the right talent to come in and help the firm along with, that understands the technology and can dig in and apply it, but make sure that you don't overreach and go into a business that's different from what your core business is. So I wouldn't recommend any corporate legal department or any law firm try and go in and become effectively a software business, because it's not really probably sustainable or the right focus for them. So those are kind of the two metrics I would take if I was looking at that.
Yeah, and I guess I should also, I neglected to say, in the full disclosure arena, that in the survey includes some comments from so-called luminaries, and somehow I was included in that through some misbegotten, I think it was a missent email or something, but I was happy to participate in that way. But so, there's lots of good stuff in here in the survey for those involved in the legal industry, legal profession, to read and take away. How does Wolters Kluwer look at, how do you use this information from this survey? Does this provide feedback that goes back into where you're headed, your strategy, your product development?
Absolutely. And I think the thing that again, I think that gap between that sense of anticipation of change coming from technology and the understanding of that is probably the most telling point for me in terms of, as we look at it, is to say that for us, it's really important to make sure that we help our clients along the path. It's not just enough to build the best mousetrap, if you will, or a new mousetrap that's kind of interesting. It's helping them with that change management process is really a key part of the engagement there, so that they go through the understanding and build the case for innovation inside the law firm or the corporate legal department, and get to a sustainable, ongoing pace with that. And I think that really kind of jumps out at you when you say, gosh, many of them feel like they're not prepared from a technology standpoint with skills, and that's a big obstacle. That's kind of got to be a focus. It's not just a focus on, hey, I can build a great ROI story for you. Well, financial is important to be sure, but it's not the entire story.
Well, any final words before we wrap up? Anything else you want to say or share? Give you the last word.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Bob, and for hosting me at sunny and highly warm Washington D.C. here. And I think that we do view this as being a community that's very important to us, the whole legal tech, library, and lawyer and legal market community. And so I think that what I would say is that, folks, if you are interested in talking more and continuing the conversation, please reach out, and we would be happy to talk with you. I think that we are trying to promote as many good ideas in the marketplace as we possibly can, and kind of further the conversation along.
I've been speaking today with Dean Sonderegger, Senior Vice President and General Manager, Wolters Kluwer Legal and Regulatory U.S. Thank you very much for taking time out of a very busy conference to sit down with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
A big thanks to Dean for taking the time to be with us today. And we've been talking about the 2019 Future Ready Lawyer Survey, which was conducted by Wolters Kluwer and which is available on their website. We've included a link to it in the write-up for this show. which you can find wherever you found this podcast, but if nowhere else, you can find it at lawnext.com. Let me also thank the sponsor who helps keep this show running, MyCase. With thousands of customers, is a trusted practice management solution helping lawyers across the country run organized, efficient, and successful law firms. You can try MyCase for free today at mycase.com. And as always, let me thank Ben Ambrogi for producing and editing the show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.